My name is Ari. I'm 35 years old. And on Thanksgiving Day, I walked up the steps of my parents' house with a pie in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other, only to realize I had been erased from my own family. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No smell of turkey, no clatter of dishes, no bursts of laughter from the dining room. Just a stillness that wrapped around me like something cold. I pushed the door open. The house was dark, empty. For a moment, I thought I was early. Maybe they were running late. Maybe they'd pop out of the kitchen any second, surprised to see me here before the table was set. But then my phone buzzed. A bank notification. $1,482 withdrawn. The note read, Air Canada. I froze, staring at the screen, a sick twist in my stomach. Slowly, I opened Instagram. And there it was. My parents and my younger sister, April. All three of them smiling in front of a departure gate, luggage stacked behind them. The caption read, Family Thanksgiving trip to Vancouver. Family, that's what they called it. A family trip. Without me. Paid for with my money. My hands were shaking as I hit call. The line rang twice before my mom answered, her voice bright, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Oh, Ari. Don't be upset. We knew you'd be too busy with work to come along. Too busy. I was standing in their empty house with pie in my hands, ready to spend the day with them. My dad's voice came through next, impatient, clipped. Don't make a scene, Ari. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. We'll see you when we're back. Then silence. They'd hung up. I just stood there, my reflection caught in the black glass of the window, the pie slipping in my hands. I realized in that moment, I wasn't their daughter. I was their provider. The one who bought the house, paid the bills, gave them comfort, and they didn't even see me as part of the family. Something inside me cracked open, sharp and final. I was done. Done being the caretaker. Done being the invisible wallet they could reach into whenever they pleased. So I did the one thing they least expected. The one move that would finally cut the cord and leave them stranded with nothing but their own choices. Before I tell you what I did, let me ask you, what would you have done if your own parents stole from you and called it family? Would you forgive them? Or would you finally make them pay? I grew up in a house where bills arrived faster than paychecks. My earliest memories aren't of birthday parties or vacations. They're of my mother at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, stacks of envelopes spread in front of her, whispering numbers under her breath like she was praying. My father had worked construction, and for a while his job kept us steady. He came home with dust in his hair, boots by the door, and the kind of tired smile that told me things were going to be all right. But when I was 13, that ended. He was crushed under part of a scaffold. He survived, but his leg never healed the way it should have. After the surgeries and rehab, he walked with a cane and carried a bitterness that filled the walls of our house. Disability checks replaced his wages, and they were never enough. My mother already worked as a nursing assistant at the hospital, but her pay barely covered groceries, even before the accident. Afterwards, she picked up double shifts. She would leave before sunrise and return long after sunset, her scrubs wrinkled, her eyes ringed with fatigue, her hands trembling as she untied her shoes. She never admitted how little her paycheck stretched. But I heard the arguments at night, my parents' voices low and sharp, talking about overdue rent, medical bills, the electricity threatening to be shut off. That was when I learned that survival wasn't something you waited for. It was something you earned. At 15, I begged for a job at the diner down the street. They handed me a bus tub and told me to start clearing tables. I worked after school until midnight, and every weekend, every holiday. While my classmates went to football games and dances, I wiped ketchup off booths and scrubbed grease from plates. My first paycheck wasn't much, but I remember placing it on the table in front of my mother. She cried, kissed my cheek, and told me I was saving us. My father didn't say anything, but the next day he handed me his old watch and told me to never be late. I thought that meant he was proud. Later I realized it meant he had accepted that I was no longer a child. From that moment on, my money was never mine. It was the family's. I had a younger sister, April, She was 5 years younger, the baby of the family, the one everyone adored. When she came home with a drawing, my parents praised her like she had painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. When I came home exhausted, they reminded me to wake up early and keep my grades steady. My mother always told me I was strong. My father always told April she was special. One word meant endless responsibility. The other meant endless praise. At 16, I picked up a second job at a clothing store in the strip mall. I folded shirts until my fingers ached, smiled at customers who never looked at me, and counted the minutes until closing time. My weekends were double shifts. My nights were homework done under dim light, my eyelids heavy, my stomach tight with hunger I ignored because groceries had to last. Prom came and went without me. Not because no one asked me, but because I had to work. I lied and told my friends I wasn't interested. The truth was that my paycheck meant heat in the winter and gas in the car. By 17, I had stopped pretending that I would ever live the way April did. She was 12 then, still the darling of the house. She got new shoes because she was still growing. She got to quit her babysitting job after 2 weeks because she didn't like it. Whenever she asked for something, the answer was yes. Whenever I asked why the rules were different, my parents said, "You're older. You're stronger. She needs more support." My strength became their excuse. When I turned 18, teachers asked about college. They told me my grades were good enough, that I could make something of myself. I wanted to believe them, but the truth was plain. There was no money. Scholarships might cover part of the cost, but the rest would bury me in debt. And even if I could have scraped it together, who would pay the bills while I was gone? Who would keep the lights on? The answer was no one. So I swallowed the dream of college whole like a stone lodged in my throat, and I kept working. April never had to make that choice. When she turned 18, our parents insisted she go. "She's the first in our family with this chance," my mother said, tears in her eyes. They didn't say who would make it possible. Scholarships and grants helped, and she took out a student loan she called free money because she didn't understand interest yet. But the gap between possible and impossible, was filled by me. I took extra shifts. I borrowed when I had to. I bought her textbooks, her dorm bedding, her laptop. I made sure she could move into her new life while I stayed behind, buried in mine. The night we sent her off to college, my parents raised their glasses. "To our bright star," my father said, his voice breaking with pride. April beamed, soaking in their admiration. I sat at the end of the table, sore from a 12-hour shift, invisible in the glow of their celebration. At 19, 20, 21, my life blurred into a cycle of work and obligation. I rented a crumbling one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and leaky faucets, but most of my paycheck still went back home. I paid their utilities, their groceries, their prescriptions. If April needed a little extra for lab fees, for sorority dues, for trips with friends, I sent it. She posted photos of spring break beaches, new clothes, shopping sprees. My parents commented endlessly, "So proud of you. Our girl is amazing." They never left those words for me. I scrolled past their pride on a 15-minute lunch breaks, trying not to let the sting cut too deep. By 23, I had transitioned from food service to an office job. It wasn't glamorous. I answered phones, filed paperwork, and scheduled meetings. But the paycheck came on time, and that steadiness meant I could cover more for my parents. My reliability became my identity. At work, it made me trusted. At home, it made me indispensable. Every small raise disappeared into bills. Every overtime shift was spoken for before I even clocked in. I told myself it was temporary. But in my family, temporary always meant forever. At 24, I was living on fumes. I woke before dawn to catch the bus downtown, spent the day under fluorescent lights, came home to overdue notices in silence. My apartment was filled with secondhand furniture, dishes from thrift stores, clothes that faded after one wash. I told myself it was enough. That stability was better than nothing. That sacrifice was proof of love. But the truth gnawed at me. I had given up everything, and no one even noticed. Then came 25. My manager called me into his office, closed the door, and told me he was promoting me to assistant manager. It came with a raise, not huge, but real. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel pride. I had built something. I had clawed my way forward. I had taken the weight of my family and somehow managed to survive it. But even as I smiled, I knew what it meant. At work, the promotion was recognition. At home, it was permission for them to demand more. My parents would expect me to cover bigger bills. April would expect me to fund whatever dream came next. And I, as always, would be expected to give without question. That was my life until 25. A childhood turned into obligation. A sister turned into a star at my expense. A family that saw me not as a daughter, but as a provider. I thought I could keep carrying it forever. I didn't know yet that one day I would finally break. I didn't buy champagne after the promotion. I bought groceries, paid the gas bill before the red notice showed up, and put $20 into a savings account I'd named Someday. But the new title changed things at work. I wasn't just answering phones and scheduling, I was suddenly in the room with clients, taking notes that became plans. Plans that became contracts if you were careful enough not to drop any of the glass parts on the way. I learned fast. There's a rhythm to deals you can only hear when you're close to them. The way a client pauses before asking for a discount, how they soften when you solve a tiny problem without making it a production. The subtle inflection your boss uses when he's steering toward a yes. I began to see the places where conversations bent, where you could place a word like a wedge and gently move the whole thing forward. A year after my promotion, my manager slid a folder across the table and said, "This one's yours to run point on if you want it." Oh, he said it lightly, like it wasn't the first time anyone had trusted me with a contract that mattered. I wanted to tell him I had been running point on something my entire life. Instead, I said, "I want it." It wasn't glamorous. A regional supplier with outdated systems, a team exhausted by delays and finger-pointing, a CFO who sounded perpetually disappointed. But I knew disappointed men. I knew how to make a plan you could execute even when the equipment was older than you and the budget looked like a joke. I built a spreadsheet so detailed it scared me, mapped their pain points, rehearsed answers until I could say them without thinking. When the meeting came, I wore my only suit and a pair of heels I could walk in without wobbling. The supplier's team filed into the conference room with coffee and skepticism. Halfway through, the CFO frowned and said, "This all sounds idealized." "It's not idealized," I said calmly. "It's sequenced. Put these steps out of order and you'll bleed money. Keep them in order and you'll start seeing wins by week 3. I don't need you to believe me yet. I need you to let me prove it." The room shifted. By the end, they asked for the revised timeline and the implementation plan in writing. 2 weeks later, the email subject line read, "Approved." The contract was signed on a gray Tuesday that smelled like printer toner and rain. I went to the bathroom, locked the stall, and cried for 2 minutes because my body needed to release something before I went back to the team and pretended this was just another day. Commission hit my paycheck a month later. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was more than I'd ever seen at once. For the first time, I didn't need to choose between paying a bill early or buying fresh fruit. My first impulse was the one I always had. Share it. I called my parents and told them I wanted to take them to dinner. Any place they liked. My mother sounded delighted and tired at the same time. "Somewhere nice," she said. "It's been ages since we've gone out properly." I made a reservation at a bistro that's popular with office people trying to pretend their lives are elegant. White tablecloths, candles, a menu that uses the word seasonal a lot. I arrived early, nervous and proud, in a way that made my hands fidget with the water glass. When they walked in, I stood to hug them. My mother's eyes did a quick sweep of the room the way she used to do at other people's houses when I was a kid. Cataloging, comparing. My father squeezed my shoulder, an old habit that said more than his words ever did. We ordered. I watched them try not to look at prices. I told them about the deal, about the team, about the CFO's face when our first milestones landed. My mother said, "That's wonderful," and then, without malice, "Do they have anything besides these tiny plates?" I feel like I'm still going to be hungry. My father added, "There's a steak place a few blocks over. Remember the one with the heavy chairs? This place is..." Fine. A flash of heat prickled under my skin. I swallowed it. Next time, I said lightly. Tonight is about celebrating. They were grateful, just not in the language I had expected. They thanked me for the meal, told me I looked lovely, asked if my job came with better health insurance yet. But their faces kept drifting toward the tables around us, like they were measuring what success should look like and finding this a little thin. I paid, left a good tip, walked them to their car. My mother hugged me and said, "We're proud of you, honey," in a tone that had a seam of worry stitched through it, as if pride itself might come with late fees. In the weeks after, the red flags flapped and I chose to call them party banners. I told myself they were tired, that their bodies had been carrying too much for too long. That, of course, they wanted something fancier after years of plastic forks and coupons. Gratitude can wear 1,000 faces. I picked the kindest one and put it on them. Work noticed my momentum. There's no such thing as a secret success in an office. The numbers circulate even if your name doesn't. My manager started handing me thorny accounts before they turned into fires. A VP I'd only ever nodded at in the hallway began stopping by my desk to ask how our clients were doing. I learned to present without apologizing. I learned that a good plan is only as good as your follow-up after people get bored. I learned that if you say "we" enough, everyone forgets that I is the one who stayed late to make the spreadsheet balance. People called me a natural, which is what they say when they don't see the 10,000 hours you spent teaching yourself how to sound calm while your heart jackhammers behind your ribs. Meanwhile, April became a revolving door of boyfriends with jawlines and big talk. She graduated and came home for a while and then didn't, moving in with a man who owned exactly 2 pans and a mirror he liked too much. When that ended, she moved back, then out, then back again. Each time she found shelter where she always had, our parents' endless patience and my endless wallet. Phone calls started with, "You won't believe what he did," and ended with, "Can you spot me until Friday?" Friday was a kind of fairy tale in our family, always coming, rarely arriving. My parents' requests changed shape too. They had been shy, apologetic once, couching every ask in long explanations about why this month was unusual. After my promotion, and after the first few commissions, unusual became the new normal. The utility company changed how they bill, my mother would say, as if the utility company had personally offended us. The medication is more expensive now. The truck needs brakes. Your father can't be stranded. Your aunt's medical fund is short. We can't be the kind of people who don't contribute. Each need was legitimate. All of them together were a tide that never receded. I told myself I didn't mind. What else was money for? I wasn't traveling. I wasn't buying jewelry or designer clothes. I wasn't even paying for cable. My friends posted wedding photos. I posted my team's quarterly charts. I liked my life because I had taught myself to like it, the way you teach yourself to like black coffee because the sugar is gone. By 27, I was unofficially running the department on the days my manager was out. By 28, it was official. I had a team, a title, and a calendar that looked like a battlefield. I hired carefully, people who could handle ambiguity, who didn't panic when the client moved the goalposts, who didn't need to be told twice that personal glory is a weak strategy. We won small and often. We lost rarely and learned quickly when we did. Numbers climbed. The VP started using my name in sentences that included the word trajectory. At home, the asks sharpened. Not just, can you help, but can you increase what you're already doing? If we could add 200 a month, my mother said once, as if we were negotiating over napkins, groceries have gone up. Everything has gone up. Another time, your father's physical therapy is helping. We'd like to add sessions. Another time, April is in between opportunities. She's interviewing soon. We don't want her to take something beneath her because of temporary pressure. Always that phrase, temporary pressure, as if time itself were going to refund us later. I did what I'd always done. I absorbed it. I tweaked my budget, cut what little frivolous spending I had, scented candles, a yoga class I never made it to, and told myself things would stabilize. Stability is a myth I believed in because I needed to. Then came the year the numbers stacked one on top of the other until I could finally see over them. 29 turned into 30 in a blur of contracts, Morning trains where I revised slide decks with one hand while holding coffee with the other. Late night emails that began circling back and ended appreciate your partnership. My team hit targets hard enough that the CFO, the same one who once sounded perpetually disappointed, stopped by our floor with cupcakes. I ate half of one and saved the other half for breakfast like a person raised by coupons. My boss handed me a bonus envelope that felt heavy enough to change the equation I'd been doing in my head since I was 15. I looked at the number and thought, I could do something that lasts. The idea came fully formed. Not a new impulse, but an old promise I'd made to myself, on nights when the apartment was too quiet and the water heater coughed. My parents had never owned a home. We'd lived in a chain of places that felt borrowed. Carpet that didn't forgive stains, landlords who raised their eyebrows at repair requests, walls that carried other people's arguments. I knew how to balance unfairness. I wanted to tip something back toward the side that should have been ours all along. I ran numbers until they stopped mocking me and started cooperating. I checked interest rates, spoke to a mortgage broker who had the personality of a stapler and the soul of a mathematician, looked at properties that smelled like cat and defeat, looked at others that looked like they had been staged by people who hated humans. And then I found it. A modest house on a quiet street, a yard big enough for my mother's roses, a garage my father could fill with tools he would organize even if he no longer used them like he once had. The kitchen wasn't big, but it had a window over the sink. I pictured my mother standing there with her hands on the counter, not working, just looking out at light. I bought the house on a Tuesday because big decisions don't wait for weekends. The closing process tried to frighten me with acronyms. I answered with documents, patience, and a signature that didn't shake. When the keys hit my palm, the weight felt less like metal and more like a permission slip I had finally signed for all of us. I didn't tell them until the day I drove them there. I said we were going to see something, didn't tell them what. My father complained good-naturedly about traffic. My mother asked if she needed to change her shoes. April didn't come. She had a thing, which could be anything from a date to a yoga class she didn't finish. That felt right. Some moments aren't for everybody. We turned onto the street. I pulled up in front of the small house with the freshly painted door and trembling rose bushes. My parents looked out the windshield like they were searching for a reason. Whose place is this? My father asked. Yours, I said, and held up the keys. Silence is a language in my family, and in that moment it spoke something I had never heard before. My mother covered her mouth. My father blinked hard like he was trying to focus on something that kept moving. Ari, my mother said, voice breaking on my name. I took them through every room. I showed them the cabinet hinges that didn't squeal, the bathroom without peeling caulk, the closet where hangers wouldn't snag. I saved the kitchen for last. My mother stepped in, touched the countertop like it might pull away. The window over the sink threw a light across her face I hadn't seen since I was small. There's a window, she said, as if I hadn't noticed, as if the window itself were a miracle and not a rectangle in a wall. My father stood in the doorway like he didn't want to bring his shoes onto a clean floor. He touched the door frame the way men touch tree trunks, testing solidity. We can't afford, he began. You don't need to, I said. It's handled. They hugged me, both at once. A clumsy, glorious tangle of arms that smelled like laundry detergent and tears. For a moment, gratitude sounded exactly like I had always wanted it to. And then, like a cloud drifting over a sun because that's what clouds do, my mother glanced around and said, The kitchen is cozy. Do you think we could take that wall down someday? Make it a little bigger. More light would be nice. It wasn't a demand, not exactly. It was a reflex, wanting the next thing while the current thing was still warm in your hands. I smiled because anger would have been unfair to the girl I used to be who needed this moment to stay beautiful. Maybe one day, I said. For now, how about we make dinner in a place that's ours? They nodded, and the wave passed, and the evening was full of small discoveries and the kinds of sentences people say when they're trying to believe good fortune won't get revoked. This is really happening. Can you believe? We'll take good care. I handed them a binder labeled House, full of warranties and schedules and numbers to call. My father held it like a manual for a complicated machine he couldn't wait to learn. My mother opened the drawer under the oven and found it empty. No broken pans, no crumbs from unknown tenants, and smiled like an apology for every time she'd wanted more than we had. I slept that night in my own small apartment on the good pillow I had splurged on, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. I thought of my parents in their new rooms, and of the way my mother had stood at the sink, as if light itself were a utility we could finally afford. I felt full and clean and tired in the right way. After the first week, the asks came again, softened by gratitude but sharpened by familiarity. The front step wobbles. Can we have someone out? We don't want to break an ankle. The grass grows so fast here, would it be possible to hire a kid from down the street? Your father will manage, but still. The fridge hums, it's probably fine, but if you hear of any deals, none of it was outrageous. All of it added up. I kept saying yes because that's what I've always done, because I wanted the house to feel like safety, not another ledger. At work, the house turned into a story people told about me. She bought her folks a place, kind, someone would say, and heads would tilt with respect that was both real and a little patronizing. My team celebrated the way teams do, cupcakes again, bad coffee, a card with everyone's name crowded toward the edges, and then we went back to the spreadsheets because houses don't pay for themselves, and quotas don't hit themselves. April moved in with another man, then out, then in with a friend whose couch wasn't as comfortable as Instagram made it look. She visited the house and posted a photo with a caption about home, as if she'd built it with her bare hands. My mother commented hearts. My father typed proud, and I clicked like, because social media has its own politeness and I wasn't about to start a war in a comment thread. I was 30 and bone-deep tired in a way that didn't show. On paper, everything gleamed. Department head, rising numbers, a team that would follow me into deadline fire and back out again. Parents in a house with a window over the sink. A sister who kept finding herself in places that weren't mine to fix. The warning signs were there like low battery symbols. The restaurant complaint I pretended was preference. The expanding requests framed as necessities. The way gratitude and expectation entwined until I couldn't tell them apart. But I didn't look too closely. I believed if I kept feeding the machine, it would keep loving me. I was wrong. I didn't know it yet, not fully. But I could feel something shifting. The way a bridge hums a different note when a truck that's too heavy moves across it. For now, I told myself the old story. This is temporary. This is what good daughters do. This is what love looks like when the world has been unfair. I kissed my parents' cheeks in the doorway of the house I'd bought them, promised to fix the front step, and drove home to my apartment, where the water heater hissed and the light over the stove flickered, and the savings account labeled someday waited like a breath I kept not taking. I had no idea that someday would arrive the way it did, with a dark house on Thanksgiving, an airline charge I didn't make, and a word I'd never let myself say out loud. Enough. But that's another chapter. For now, I slept and set my alarm and woke up before dawn to go back to the place where I solved other people's problems for a living. The most employable part of me polished to a shine. The last 5 years of my life looked the same from the outside. Early trains, late nights, polite smiles, clean deliverables. If you flipped through my calendar, you'd think I'd mastered adulthood. Projects closed, teams staffed, revenue targets met. Inside my bank app, you'd see something else. Deposits followed by transfers, followed by just this once, and only until next month. And we'll pay you back when things calm down. Things never calmed down. I became the calm. Everyone else surfed on it. When I took my parents to see their new house, I thought the heavy part of the story was over. I'd moved the boulder. I'd fixed the thing that was too big to fix. But relief is a short window if people use it to look for the next thing. The first year was small asks, repairs, a lawn service when the summer heat made my father dizzy, a new fridge because the old one hummed like a plane about to take off. Then the requests changed tone. Have you seen the neighbor's fence? My mother asked one afternoon on a video call, angling the camera so I could admire the clean lines of someone else's property. It makes the whole street look so polished. It's nice, I said, meaning it. Maybe someday. It doesn't have to be top of the line, she added quickly like she was doing me a favor. But A proper boundary. The old chain link is so tired. A proper boundary. The irony didn't land until much later. My father had his own list. The HVAC guy says it's fine. He'd start. But if we get that programmable thermostat, we could save money. Also, your mother wants a brighter light over the sink. The bulbs they sell at the corner store are no good. I said yes so often that yes stopped sounding like a choice. I told myself it was love. It was also training. The money I sent for utilities sometimes softened into gifts for April. Little things at first, clothes for interviews, an online course she swore would unlock something. Then bigger things, a security deposit to get out of a bad situation, a car repair so she can get to the job she almost has, a trip that might lead to a new opportunity, because networking is everything. April was 30 by then and still finding herself, a phrase that had aged poorly and cost me more every year. I tried boundaries. I did. Can we keep the emergency fund for actual emergencies? I asked once, careful, soft. My mother's face closed like a book. If we were the kind of family who nickel and dimed each other, she said, we never would have made it this far. We made it this far, I replied before I could stop myself. Silence. Then the quick pivot she's always had. You're right, honey. I'm just tired. Your sister's had a rough run. Rough runs don't last a decade. But in our house, temporary was a religion. Faith meant paying tithes. Work, at least, rewarded the tithes I paid there. I learned to make space for junior staff to shine and then quietly fix the parts they dropped. I learned to read a room in the first 30 seconds and adjust the entire pitch without letting my voice wobble. I learned that praise comes in public, but trust comes in private. And trust is what keeps you employed when the quarter is ugly. Those years built a reputation I hadn't planned on building. If I was in the room, things would not fall apart. People started breathing easier when I sat down. It felt good the way competence always does, until it becomes the reason people stop asking what you need. The illness scare came on a Thursday in late October. I was on a work trip 2 time zones away, hunched over a bar-top desk in my hotel room, editing a proposal while the AC rattled like a loose tooth. My phone lit up with my mother's name and a string of texts that came like stones thrown at a window. Call me now, it's your father. Hospital stable, but tests. Don't panic. Panic always arrives exactly when someone tells you not to. I called. Her voice was too fast. He's okay, for now, but they need to run more tests. They want to keep him overnight. I don't want to talk money, but they're saying the deposit is... It's not small, Ari. I can't reach the credit union. They're closed. I hate to ask. You're not asking, I said. I've got it. I'd been preparing for this exact call since the day I bought the house. I'd opened a separate account, a little bucket I fed when I could, named Parents Emergency. It wasn't huge, but it was real. I had a debit card tied to it in my desk drawer. I carried a digital wallet link on my phone. The problem was proximity. I was 3 hours behind with a meeting I couldn't blow without burning a year's work. Transferring from my main account to theirs would mean delays I didn't trust. I made the easy call, the one that felt like trust dressed as efficiency. Mom, I'm going to add you as an authorized user to the emergency account and send you the details, I said. Use it for the hospital. Only for emergencies. We'll clean it up when I get back. She exhaled like I'd given her oxygen. You're an angel? I don't know what we'd do without you. You'd do what I did at 15, I didn't say. You'd make a way. I emailed a screenshot with the card info and set up her access while I was still on the phone. The hospital took the deposit, ran the tests, kept my father overnight for observation, and sent him home with a follow-up and a handful of warnings he'd ignore. I flew home after the pitch, exhausted and oddly grateful that a worst-case scenario had rehearsed itself and ended in relief. Nothing overtly terrible happened right away. That's the trick with lines. You don't notice you've crossed them until you turn around and can't see where they were. The week slid toward Thanksgiving the way they always do. Budgets, deliverables, piles of jackets on chairbacks, pumpkin-flavored everything in the break room. April pinged me with a new opportunity, a startup looking for brand voices. The rate was insultingly low. She called it a foot in the door. I sent rent money and said I couldn't do more this month. "You're cold lately," she texted. "What happened to you?" I stared at the screen long enough for it to go dark. At home, my parents were in a new phase. Comparative living. The corner house put up shutters, my mother reported. White. It brightens everything. "That's nice," I said. "Please use the emergency account only for emergencies, okay? I'm rebalancing after the hospital." "Of course," she said. "Please, we're not children." Thanksgiving has always been our reset. No matter how the year went, we sat at the same table and told ourselves the story that keeps families glued together. We're flawed but loyal. We're tired but together. We're not like those other people who fall apart. I made plans. I bought a pie. I moved my afternoon meeting so I could get there early and help. On the Tuesday before the holiday, I checked the emergency account to see what I'd need to top up. The balance was lower than it should have been, but still healthy. A small charge here and there. Pharmacy, hardware store, coffee. I told myself it was fine. Emergencies aren't always spectacular. Wednesday was travel day for half the city. For me, it was just traffic. I put the pie on the passenger seat and my phone face down in the cup holder so I wouldn't look at emails. I sang along with a song I didn't like because the FM station refused to give up on it. The sky was the canned gray color of November that makes yellow porch lights look like mercy. I pulled into my parents' driveway and felt the first tug of wrongness. No cars on the street, no clatter from the kitchen, no sound at all. I told myself I was early. I carried the pie to the door, fished out my key, and stepped into a house that smelled like nothing. Silence is not neutral when you're expecting noise. It's accusation. I stood in the entry, listening for signs of life, and got my answer the way I always do, from my phone. A notification banner slid across the lock screen. I raised it without thinking. Withdrawal, $1,482. Airline purchase. The account name under it made my mouth go dry. Not my main account, not theirs. Parents. Emergency. I opened the banking app with hands that had suddenly forgotten how to be hands. The charge sat there, bold and already settled, like a dare. Below it, another charge, rideshare to the airport. Below that, an airport cafe. I clicked for details I already knew I didn't want. The airline code bloomed on the screen. The destination read like a punchline I wasn't in on. Vancouver. I didn't breathe for a count of 5. I opened Instagram because when the world jolts, you go to the easy proof. The first photo sat at the top of my feed like it had been waiting for me. My mother, my father, April. 3 heads, 1 frame. The kind of grins people wear when a stranger offers to take a picture for them in front of a gate they're excited about. The caption, family Thanksgiving trip. A maple leaf emoji. A plane. A heart. Family. I closed my eyes and saw myself in their kitchen, in their house with their keys and my money. I saw 15-year-old me bussing tables. I saw 25-year-old me shaking hands over a contract. I saw 30-year-old me holding keys on a front lawn. I saw all the versions of me that had paid for the privilege of being left behind. I called. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright with the acoustics of a place designed to sell motion. "Ari, we're about to board. Is everything okay?" "Is everything okay?" I repeated, my voice not trusting itself. "You use the emergency account. Don't be dramatic," she said, that little laugh she uses to soften the edges of things she knows are wrong. It was such a good deal. And you're always so busy with work. You said emergencies, and honestly, we needed this. Your father's health scare. He needs a break. We all do. An emergency is a hospital, I said. Not a holiday. Ari, my father's voice cut in, background muffled, impatient. Let your mother enjoy herself. We'll talk when we get back. When you get back, I said slowly, from the family trip you didn't tell me about, that you paid for with the money I asked you not to touch. Silence. Then the pivot. We thought you'd be working. my mother said, softer now. We didn't want to put pressure on you. You know how you get when things are last minute. How I get. As if reliability were a flaw that excused theft. The gate agent announced final boarding. My mother's voice turned practical. We'll bring you something from the market, she said. You love those little soaps. We'll call when we land. You're not going to apologize, I said, amazed at the calm in my mouth. Ari, don't make a scene, my father said, and then the line went dead. I stood in their entryway with a pie in my hands like a prop from someone else's scene and understood something bone deep. I had trained them to believe there was no difference between my money and theirs, my time and theirs, my love and their convenience. I had called it duty so long that they'd stopped hearing the difference between daughter and provider. Maybe I had to. Up until that moment, I'd always picked the kindest explanation for their choices. Tired, stressed, thoughtless. This was different. This was deliberate. This was a choice made in advance, executed with the ease of practice. They didn't forget me. They left me. Something in me shifted like a floorboard snapping under weight. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was clarity. And it was the end of a story I'd been telling myself since I was 15. That if I gave enough, they would never forget whose hand was holding the ladder. They forgot. Or maybe they never looked. I set the pie on the counter of the quiet kitchen with the light my mother had asked for. I walked through the house I had bought to the window over the sink, where the evening would have been golden if anyone had been home to notice. I opened my banking app, stared at the Parents Emergency label, and realized I had named the account wrong. The emergency wasn't theirs. It was mine. The next chapter would write itself in numbers and locks, in words they hadn't heard from me before. But before the reckoning, there was this. The hinge the door swings on. The moment the story tips from habit to consequence. They were boarding a plane to Vancouver. I was standing in a house built from my backbone, and the cord I'd refused to cut for 20 years was finally warm in my hand. Airports are built on noise, rolling wheels, overhead calls, impatient sighs. But the first hour after my parents' plane touched down in Vancouver, my world was built on silence. Not the absence of sound. My phone was buzzing itself across the counter with notifications. But silence inside me. The kind that comes after you finally decide to stop negotiating with people who never kept their end of the bargain. I had logged into my banking app before their wheels hit the runway. The motions were simple, mechanical. Transfer balances, revoke access, close loopholes. I watched the numbers slide from one column to another like pieces of furniture being moved out of a house I'd outgrown. The Parents' Emergency account became mine again. Their linked cards died in real time, silent as candle flames snuffed out. The utility autopay stayed. I wasn't cruel. They wouldn't freeze in winter, they wouldn't lose the lights, they wouldn't starve. But the endless extras, the fences, the shutters, the gifts for April, the phantom emergencies that always looked suspiciously like vacations, those were gone. For the first time in years, my money belonged to me. It took exactly 53 minutes for the first call to come. My mother's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. She tried again. Then my father. Then April. By the fourth attempt, I answered, because I wanted to hear what it sounded like when people realized the endless well had dried up. Ari. My mother's voice was high, the way it gets when she's both scared and furious. What did you do? Our card just got declined at the cafe. We're in a foreign country with nothing. Do you understand how humiliating this is? Yes, I said. I understand exactly. This isn't funny, she snapped. Your father nearly collapsed again when he saw the bill. And April. She hasn't eaten since the plane. She's hungry. In the background, my sister's voice rose like static. Tell her. Tell her I need food. What kind of monster leaves her family stranded? I pictured them at the airport. April with her manicured nails and dramatics, my mother with her pearls, my father's face red with a rage he pretended was about dignity and not dependency. For once, I didn't feel smaller imagining them. For once, I felt taller. You made your choice, I said. You took the emergency account and used it for a vacation. You didn't even bother to invite me. That was the moment you cut the cord. All I did was tie off my end. You're our daughter, my father roared in the background, his voice sharp enough to rattle the cheap speaker. You don't get to abandon us like this. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me. My laugh came out sharper than I expected. I've been paying your bills since I was 17. I bought you a house at 30. I made sure you never had to choose between medicine and groceries, and you still managed to treat me like an afterthought, like a wallet with legs. That's not fair, my mother shouted. We're family. Families help each other. Families don't drain one child dry while calling the other one the baby well into her 30s. Families don't leave someone holding a pie at an empty table because they secretly boarded a plane without telling her. Families don't lie about emergencies to get vacations. There was silence. Then April's whining cut through. So what? You're just leaving us here. We don't have enough cash for the week. We'll be trapped. You can't do this. I can, I said, and I am. I'll cover the utilities back home. You'll have heat, water, food on the table. That's it. No more upgrades, no more fences, no more bailouts for April's endless new starts. Vancouver was your decision. Paying for it is your responsibility. You're cruel, my mother hissed. Cruel and ungrateful. I thought of every birthday where my gifts were forgotten. Every Christmas where April's pile towered and mine barely filled a corner. Every "you're so busy" airy dismissal when I asked for even a shred of attention. Cruel was a word they'd been polishing for me since I was a child, but this time it didn't land. Ungrateful, I said. I'm 35 years old, and I've spent half my life giving you everything you wanted. Gratitude would have been letting me sit at the table I paid for. You taught me what loyalty looks like, Mom. Today, I'm just finally teaching it back. There was a shuffle, a slam. Then my father's voice boomed directly into the phone. Book us flights home. Now, you don't want to know what will happen if you don't. I already did, I said, one way, for tomorrow. Coach seats. That's the last purchase you'll ever see from me. You ungrateful little, he started, but I ended the call. They rang 10 more times that night. I turned my phone face down on the counter and listened to the silence of my own house. Not their house. Not our house, mine. Paid for with my work, my years, my compromises. Mine. For once, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt free. The next morning, I checked the airline app. Their tickets were confirmed. The money was gone from my account, but this time it didn't sting. It felt like cutting the last frayed rope off a sinking ship. I imagined them at the gate, tired, angry, clutching paper boarding passes like evidence of their victimhood. I imagined April pouting through security, my mother whispering complaints, my father's jaw set like stone. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. By the time their plane touched down back home, I'd already drafted the new budget. Utilities on autopay. A grocery stipend small enough to remind them it wasn't infinite. Everything else redirected to savings, to vacations of my own, to a future that didn't leave me holding a pie in an empty house. They called again, of course, they always will. But the sound doesn't rattle me anymore. Because for once, the emergency wasn't theirs. It was mine. And I survived it by cutting the cord they refused to cut themselves. That was the last gift I gave them, a ticket home. Everything after that belongs to me.